Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, November 3rd. Welcome to the Transportation and Environment Committee. We have two items on our agenda today. First is Expedited Bill 3025, Noise Control, Leaf Removal Equipment, Enforcement Procedures. This bill removes the photographic evidence requirement for enforcing the county's gas-powered leaf blower ban, which took effect of July 1st. 2025 of this year. Under the existing law, the director has discretion in deciding whether to issue a penalty or citation to a violation. And as noted in the Office of Legislative Oversight's Racial Equity and Social Justice statement for this legislation, it says, quote, a 2011 study commissioned by the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce found that nationally, compared to their share of business ownership across all sectors, Latino-owned businesses were overrepresented in the landscaping industry, and more local data that we know of suggests that this is true here in Montgomery County as well. And so that given today's national political climate, we have introduced this bill as a committee along with Councilmember Albornoz to make sure that the individuals who are doing our landscaping work feel safe, do not feel that neighbors or other individuals in a particular community are taking their photograph for untoward purposes, to aid and abet the actions that Donald Trump and ICE might be taking, and so that this bill ensures that a single complaint is sufficient to initiate enforcement of the gas-powered leaf blower ban, maintaining fairness while also upholding the integrity of the system. And I'll also note that other jurisdictions, including the District of Columbia, the City of Annapolis, and several jurisdictions in California, use a similar process and do not require photographic evidence. In those jurisdictions, a single witness complaint is enough to begin enforcement, and we are welcomed by Councilmember Albornoz, aforementioned as the fourth co-lead on this piece of legislation. I'll turn it over to Ms. McCartney-Green and then open it up to any additional comments people might want to make.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Glass. Just to reflect the summary of the public hearing, we did have a public hearing on October 21st. And there were 7 speakers that testified. Supporters included the county executive that was supportive of this legislation because it would be more effective and less intrusive, and that it would make immigrant workers feel unsafe if we continue to allow photographic evidence. Opposition did come from residents and business owners and legal advocates that were concerned about arbitrary enforcement and fines, unverified complaints, and whether there was going to be any modification of due process. Council staff did go through and provide some additional questions under our discussion point.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I know that you've added a number of questions for us to talk through as we move forward. I don't know if Councilmember Albornoz or anyone else had any additional comments to make. No, you're good? Great. Let's start working through the packet.
Yeah, so on page 4 of your packet, first question just starting out is, what is the existing enforcement process for a noise violation? And just wanted to be clear that this bill did not modify that there is still a process where DEP under Chapter 31B can still issue a Class A violation. For the first offense, it's $500, and second offense is $750, and also be able to seek any injunctive relief as appropriate through the Office of County Attorney. And with that, there is a process where if a person that's aggrieved is unhappy with the decision, there are ways to reconsider and doing that. So just wanted to clarify that that wasn't being modified. That is existing law, and that would still continue to remain.
Okay. You want to keep walking through?
Yeah, and so number 2 really just talks about what this really does is modify the number of witnesses that may make a complaint. Generally, for a noise violation, it's at least two witnesses. Specifically for the leaf blower ban, it's just one witness that would be required. And then council staff, looking at number 3, council staff did look at DEP's website to see what the form would look like and how an individual could file a complaint, and noticed that the attestation language, that there is very strong and clear that this information will be used in court as evidence to support the complaint. And what that does is really just verifies the credibility and reliability of the information. And so despite removing the photographic evidence, there is still enough there to proceed, have a legal proceeding with investigation. And so just wanted to make sure that was clear, that reducing it from 2 to 1 in this did not modify or trump anything that we have here.
And I noted in opening comments, and as is stated in the packet, that Montgomery County is actually the outlier in requiring the photographic evidence. Most other jurisdictions that have this prohibition rely on a single attestation, as you noted, and appreciate the framing of this so that someone cannot frivolously make a complaint.
Yes.
Keep going. Oh, did...
That was it for me summarizing. So unless if there were specific questions of it, this process had to happen because in the law it specifically says that a photographic evidence was needed to initiate a complaint, and so this removes that.
Great. Thank you. So that is the legislation as the 4 of us introduced it. Open it up to any comments anyone might want to make. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. So the photographic evidence is not required. Will there still be an option for it? I'm concerned that if it's optional, that people will continue to take photos. So is the process, the option will go away to submit photographic?
Yeah, and from my understanding of looking at DEP's website, there is no option to upload a photo.
Great, thank you. And then from the perspective of the language talks about the willingness to state in a court of law. That's assuming that the person getting the fine doesn't just pay the fine, and that disputes it, right? And so, do we have any experience so far as to the violations and whether people are asking for it to go to court?
And one of the things to keep in mind was that this legislation went into effect July 1st. And so from my understanding, working out the kinks in the enforcement piece, I'm not aware of any actual violation that was brought to court. I am aware that DEP does have the authority to first initially issue a fine. My understanding is they've gone about an approach of more education and outreach and informing and trying that approach as first.
Great, thank you. Yeah, when we talked about the initial bill, that was the understanding, was that there would be an educational piece before the fine started. So I think it's important that I understand that if we have one witness, that person will, if it's contested, they'll have to go to court. My concern is that people who get the fine don't get to that point. They just pay it, and regardless of whether they are using the leaf blower or not, they might pay the fine just because it's an easier route. But that's not for this discussion. I just wanted to bring that up. So that's it. Thanks.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, and I very much appreciate Councilmember Balcom for raising those points. And so last night I got on the DEP website and I looked at the form, and I do think it takes it very seriously. Like I think we'll have to monitor this to look at the number of fines and other things once a DEP shifts into that gear. But looking at the form as it is now, it makes it very serious that you are filing a complaint and the information that's needed and the what you need to comply with. So I appreciate DEP doing that, especially now that we're moving it from 2 to 1 complaint. But I agree with Councilmember Balcom and the concerns around that.
Great. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. On a lighter note, I love your jacket, Ms. McCartney Green. That is a fantastic orange for November. So for better or worse, our office has been receiving a lot of calls from landscaping businesses with anecdotal information regarding what's transpiring on the ground as we speak. And they have reported instances in which landscapers are harassed, followed to their vehicles, and yelled at, and awful things being said. So it's a state of transition. but just underscores the importance of us encouraging civility among our residents as we go through this transition, and to please allow some grace as these businesses adjust to what is a very radically different policy for them. And I'll also note that what we've heard from some of the landscaping businesses that are based in Montgomery County that have made the switch and are doing what we've asked them to do is that there are a number of businesses coming from other jurisdictions that may not be as aware of this policy change. So that's another reason why I think it's important to encourage our residents to just allow a little bit of grace here as we go through this change. But I do once again appreciate DEP's and the executive branch's partnership with us on this, and I think that I also appreciate the committee bringing this forward so quickly in the midst of the busiest season, obviously, for landscapers, so that we can hopefully get this passed as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Albornoz, and thank you for continuing to voice the concerns that our landscapers have. And I'd say even more importantly, thank you for injecting grace into this conversation. We need much more of it across the board. With that, we have our legislation. Does not appear to be any amendment suggested or offered. So all those in favor of expedited bill 3025? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McCartney-Green. And now we will transition to the second item on our agenda, which is an update on transit services, specifically bus rapid transit, ride-on reimagined, and fare-free buses. So if MCDOT and team Good morning, everybody. So in this briefing, the Department of Transportation is going to give us a status update on the Bus Rapid Transit program, on the implementation of the Ride-on Reimagined study, and then also the transition to fare-free bus service. The committee and the full council have made historic investments in our bus system over the last number of years, first making our buses free for all kids all the time nearly 7 years ago, to the transition on July 1st of this year, making all ride-on buses fare-free. And these efforts have reflected the years of work that we've undertaken to make transit more accessible and equitable. And now that as we move into this new phase, we need to focus on reliability, on connectivity, and on accessibility. We need a transit network that gets riders from where they are to where they need to go quickly and dependably across the entire county, including East County and Up County, which have among the highest transit ridership rates in all of Montgomery County. And so with today's discussion, we're going to get an update on a number of particular projects, particularly Veers Mill and 355 Flash BRT projects. Together that with the other investments, we know that we are making more investments into the future. There's a lot that we're going to go through. I know there are a number of presentations, but I'll start with Mr. Kenny and anything else you'd like to add.
Nothing to add on content. That was a good overview. Just one flag that the BRT presentation, the first presentation we'll hear, is attached to the staff report online. The ride-on presentation was received shortly after the report was posted, and so will be added as a revised staff report after this work session for the public record.
Good PSA to all those who are following. Thank you.
Ready for? Should I start? Yes?
Yeah, so I didn't know if Mr. Kenny was going to take us through, but yeah,
Nope,
we'll start with DOT.
It's going to be me first. Okay. Good morning, Transportation and Environment Council members. And thank you for having us here today to provide an update.
You want to introduce yourself, Ms. Conklin?
Oh, I was just about to.
There
yes.
you go. Okay.
So to provide an update of the Bus Rapid Transit Program, I'm Joanna Conklin. I am the county's Bus Rapid Transit Program Manager, and I'll be giving a brief overview of the program, and then I will turn it over to Jamie Henson, to my left, who is the BRT Project Implementation Manager for the county, and he will go through the specifics of the specific project implementations. Our area is growing and increasing in population density and employment. Expanding roadway capacity is expensive and impactful. So to responsibly accommodate this growth, we need to invest in high capacity, high reliability, high quality transit that gives people alternatives to driving. The county's long-range plan, Thrive Montgomery, focuses growth along major corridors, allowing targeted investment along these corridors. The growth corridors align with the planned BRT routes, designed to connect centers of activity. The BRT investment made in these corridors will improve transit speed and reliability, access and safety, particularly for those who bike and walk. Flash is a planned network of 8 upgraded interconnected bus rapid transit, or BRT, routes. Flash is different from typical bus service, offering high-frequency service and faster trips thanks to dedicated bus lanes and extended green lights for buses. Flash buses also provide added convenience to riders, with near-level boarding, making it easy to step or roll onto the bus, as well as bike racks on board the bus. Flash BRT stations feature real-time information displays, lighting, and upgraded seating. Flash BRT corridors also have enhanced pedestrian infrastructure, including new sidewalks, shared use paths, and crosswalks. This graphic shows the Flash Visionary System Map, which is consistent with the 2013 Transit Corridors Master Plan, and it shows the expansiveness of the network upon full build-out. You can see that the connected BRT lines create a web of high-capacity, high-quality, reliable transit that can get you almost anywhere in the county. The network will also connect to major transit services such as Metro, the Purple Line, MARC, and Amtrak. Not only will Flash accommodate our future growth, but it will also provide better, faster, and more reliable transit for those who need it. As shown in this slide, 12% of households within a half mile of a Flash station own no vehicle. 16% of households are considered low income, and 67% house people of color. Studies have shown that access to transportation is one of the major drivers in lifting people out of poverty, and developing high-quality transit options is critical to providing opportunities for our community. Additionally, the Flash corridors currently being developed already have a solid base of transit customers to build on. As you can see in this slide, the Veers Mill Road corridor currently serves 10,000 riders a day, and the Maryland 355 corridor serves 14,000. Improving corridors that already have customers riding transit increases Flash's potential for success. We want to provide better service to these riders and also entice new riders to try transit by offering a product that can compete with driving alone. Oops, sorry. This slide shows the status of the 5 Flash projects currently in various stages of development, as well as the typical implementation process for a Flash project. So a BRT corridor project starts with a decision by the County Council to fund the project, and at that point, it is placed into DOT's budget in the BRT program CIP for planning and alternatives analysis. Once Council has selected an alternative for the corridor, a decision is made about whether to fund preliminary design and preliminary design and environmental review. It is at this point that the project is broken out into its own CIP project, and during preliminary design, a decision is made about whether to put the project into the federal funding pipeline. Following completion of preliminary design, Following completion of preliminary design, there's another touch point with Council for a decision on funding final design and construction. We have been advancing these projects generally through alternative delivery methods such as design build, progressive design build, and construction manager at risk. And so we typically request that both final design and construction be funded concurrently so that we can move into a contract for final design and construction under one of these alternative delivery methods. So as you can see on the graphic on the right, the first flash line on US 29 has been in service since 2020. And preliminary design is also being completed for the second phase of the project to add dedicated transit lanes on a portion of the corridor. The Veers Mill Road line has recently completed design, and right-of-way and utility relocation activities have begun on this line. And this line is pretty far along in the federal capital investment grant process with FTA and close to receiving a grant. Maryland 355 Central has completed preliminary design and we're currently negotiating a contract for a progressive design builder for that line. It is also in the pipeline for federal funding, although not quite as far along as Veers Mill at this point. And then we also have two projects that are in the planning phases, New Hampshire Avenue and North Bethesda Transitway, and those will be coming to council soon for an alternative selection. So before we get into more detailed status of the specific projects, I just wanted to provide a brief overview of the federal funding program that we anticipate to provide a significant amount of financial assistance toward these projects. So this next slide shows the two programs that we're utilizing for the projects. Both of these fall under the Federal Transit Administration at the U.S. Department of Transportation. The one on the top is the New Starts program, and it is for projects over $400 million, like our Maryland 355 project. It allows for larger projects, but it caps the federal share at 50%. Our Veers Mill project is in the other category called Small Starts on the bottom of the graphic. Smaller projects are permitted in this program. They can request up to 80% federal share, up to a maximum of $150 million. So for the Veers Mill Road project, we are asking for the maximum federal share of $150 million. You can see in these charts that the Small Starts process is slightly more streamlined than the New Starts process, and that's because the projects are smaller in size and scale. So they have less FTA oversight, and they can generally move through the process more quickly. This graphic shows the evaluation and rating process for these capital investment grant projects, both New Starts and Small Starts. So it's important to note that this process is different from typical discretionary grants that we might be used to, such as RAISE or the no and low emissions programs that FTA has, in that it's a prescribed process that each project enters and it is evaluated and is a prescribed process that each project enters and then is evaluated on a predetermined set of evaluation criteria. The project does not compete directly with other projects, but rather it's evaluated on its own timeline and merits. The bottom portion of the graphic shows the evaluation measures that are used by FTA, which include both project justification and local financial commitment measures. So I will now turn the presentation over to Jamie, and he will provide an overview of each project status.
Excellent, thank you. Again, Jamie Henson, I'm our BRT implementation manager. I'll talk through the 5 projects that Ms. Conklin noted a moment ago: Veers Mill, 355, US 29, New Hampshire, and North Bethesda. Excuse me. We'll start with Veers Mill first, though. Veers Mill, as you all know, is a cross-county connector. Our project extends from Montgomery College Rockville to Wheaton by way of downtown Rockville. As Ms. Conklin mentioned, it's a heavy ridership corridor already. Roughly 10-ish thousand people are riding buses in that corridor today. It's 7.6 miles, 12 stations, looking to provide headways of roughly 6 to 10 minutes in the peak periods. We think that it'll be about 25 to 30% faster than a baseline scenario once we build this project. It also includes bicycle and pedestrian safety infrastructure, both at the intersections as well as sidewalks and paths along the side of the roadway, and it's a roughly a little over $200 million project cost in our approved CIP. Brief progress update. Uh-oh. I'll cut to the chase. It's going well. It's going very well, actually. We're moving forward very quickly. We finished design. NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, process, which is includes all the federal regulatory environmental processes are complete. Our federal funding application is pending, so it's really our last step. One of the more important things maybe to recognize is that we're recovering a 12-to-1 ratio. For every dollar the county puts in, there are $12 from either the federal government or the state that we're looking for to fund this project. So it's a great return on our county investment. And we're literally, when we're talking to the Federal Transit Administration, we're next in queue. They use this term with us, right? We are the next most qualified project to be implemented. So we're literally next in line, and we started utility relocation with Verizon, Pepco, and we'll be starting with Washington Gas, I believe, in the next week or two. We've been in the process of acquiring property in the corridor. We need portions of 137 properties along Veers Mill Road, permanent easements as opposed to temporary easements. So temporary easements being for construction, permanent easements, which we would have to maintain, are needed on about 75% of those 137. That is typically a 5 to 10 foot wide swath along the roadway, mostly in front of homes, some in back. There are some instances along Veers Mill where the project goes along the backs of homes. So some places it's in the backs of homes, most are in the front yards, and typically for sidewalks or paths. We've contacted all the owners of the homes at this point. We're currently in the process of appraising and making offers on those properties. This activity will continue through calendar year 2026. We recently held a public meeting a couple of weeks ago, had good turnout. I think we had somewhere 75 to 80 folks, very positive. Asked us a lot about safety and how fast we could get the project done to implement safety measures. Specifically. And then we followed up with about 6 or 7 different folks on one-on-one meetings. So we've had our property acquisition folks, our project leadership, and our designers in a meeting one-on-one with those folks to talk through specifics of their property and what they could expect to change. And then just a rough overview of the calendar, of the schedule. The star notes our entry into project development. We entered project development with Federal Transit Administration late in 2022. We finished the design and environmental process, as I've noted. We started property acquisition as of earlier in this year, utility relocation as of a couple months ago. We'll continue doing that, and then we'll start heavier construction next calendar year. All right, I'll skip to Maryland 355 next. 15.5-mile corridor from Germantown to Rockville, as opposed to what we're talking about on Veers Mill. There'll be 3 service lines. It's a long route, so there'll be 3 different service lines in the corridor. On that trunk segment between roughly Gunners Branch to Rockville, 4 to 8 minute peak period headways. We're going to improve transit travel speed. We're going to add bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements, and our project cost in our approved CIP is about $450 million. Now, as for progress, we've entered the new starts part of the FTA capital improvement grant, so the higher dollar portion, as Ms. Conklin was noting earlier. We are near the selection of a progressive design builder, so that we'll be able to advance design and then ultimately construction. We received, as of a week and a half ago, our draft NEPA document, so we're close to being through our environmental compliance phase. We're pursuing nearly 50% federal funds. That's less than Veers Mill because of the project size. We've expanded our corridor advisory committee to make sure we're inclusive of all communities across the corridor. And we've been meeting with the community. We met last, I believe, in April. We'll meet again probably January, maybe February in the coming year with the community. And then again, as a reminder of the timeline, again, the STAR is entry into project development. This was about a year ago, almost to the day, not quite. We're finishing up that environmental evaluation. We'll then move into final design. It begins to overlap with the progressive design builder, but we'd expect more substantive construction to begin about the beginning of calendar year 28. Then moving to phase 2 of US 29, 5 miles of dedicated medium bus lanes, roughly between Sligo Creek and Tech Road. Generally a single center running median lane, except in the northern portion, north of Stewart Lane, and then in the middle of Four Corners. We would expect this project to reduce southbound AM transit travel time by about 40% compared to a no-build situation. We're including targeted pedestrian improvements. I'll show you an example of what I mean in the graphic on the next slide. We are at completion of 35% design. We'll be going to our colleagues at planning for mandatory referral, hopefully in the next month or two. We are considering how we might be able to pursue federal funds with this project, mindful programmatically that we want to make sure that we're using federal funds for the right projects and maximizing our request of the federal government here. And then final design and construction remain unfunded. Then property needs. We recently went to a public meeting now, I guess about a month ago, and showed our layouts. What you're seeing in the graphic is one of our layouts at Hastings Drive, which is immediately to the south of the Beltway, is where the Beltway ramps terminate. As you probably know about this quarter, it's pretty highly constrained. There's a lot of terrain. It goes up and down. There are a lot of homes on hills, making it really difficult to figure out how to adjust the right-of-way. And so we've really had to think through very hard about how we would want to do that. And that's exacerbated because the delay is the highest in those two most constrained areas. And specifically in Burnt Mills and Four Corners, that's where the delay comes from. So thinking about the project in light of those two constraints is really important. We're projecting an impact on one commercial building in Burnt Mills. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a complete property take. It does mean that there is a building that overlaps where we think we need to build the project. Most of the property needs are for left turns and at those two major nodes I've noted. We're working with those property owners to minimize those potential impacts, and we're meeting regularly with the community. I think we've met 7 times in this calendar year with that community so far. And then for our planning studies, first with New Hampshire, the alignment is Colesville to Fort Totten Metro Station. There are a variety of equity communities along the corridor. There's roughly 10,000 people per day along what used to be the former K buses. I believe it's the 6 and 6X now. It varies month to month, but generally close to 10,000 just on those. There are a variety of other buses. We've got multiple ride-on buses serving that corridor. There are a lot of people and a lot of buses on that corridor. And what we found is that exclusive bus lanes can significantly improve transit travel times, both for what would be the Flash as well as potentially other bus routes along the corridor. And then for North Bethesda, the alignment is Montgomery Mall, Westfield Montgomery Mall to the North Bethesda Metro Station, roughly 65,000 more people and jobs by 2030. Obviously a major redevelopment area, multiple high schools, and exclusive bus lanes can significantly improve the future transit travel times over a baseline scenario. So next steps with these studies. First, we'll be submitting our report for New Hampshire, hopefully in the next month, to our colleagues at planning. That will go to the planning board. There'll be a hearing. We don't know exactly when that would be, usually a couple of months. Following that, it would then presumably come back to council, where you would be asked to select an alternative, similar with North Bethesda, except probably 2 to 3 months behind. We would hope early winter, January timeline with the same approach. So with that, I'll pause, and we can take questions.
Okay, a lot to digest. Thank you very much for that presentation. I want to start with some level setting for this conversation because we've been talking as a county about bus rapid transit for a very long time. It was, in fact, the county executive, when he was here at the council, that he proposed the network that we're now discussing, bus rapid transit, and it was nearly 20 years ago, 19 years ago to be specific, that he first proposed this, and now we're seeing it being built out, being planned, working on the funding. And there are a lot of questions that all of us get and that I get as well as we work through the planning and making sure that the network works as originally designed. And so I appreciate the thorough walkthrough, Mr. Henson, for all of the 5, 6 different networks that are being proposed. The first 2 that you talked about, Veers Mill and 355 Central, there were cost estimates attached to that in the PowerPoint presentation. 207 million that was needed for Veers Mill and 450 that's needed for 355, but there were no cost estimates for the remaining work on 29 New Hampshire and North Bethesda. Do you have that information?
Well, so part of it, it's on.
No, you're on.
Yes, sorry. So it depends a little bit on what year it's built, right? So in the baseline scenario for US 29, I believe we're at approximately 160 million, but that would increase as you inflate depending on what year it's constructed in. So the base price, if I'm remembering correctly, and I can get back to you with the precise number, but it's roughly $160 million. Now, if you were to see it in a budget proposal, it's probably going to be in a later year, and that number may be slightly more inflated. So you won't see 160 million. I hope that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. Trying to forecast with cost of
Right.
construction and inflation and everything else, that makes sense. And I should have prefaced this conversation by saying one of the reasons that we're having it is because there will be a joint T&E and GO committee hearing on Wednesday to talk about the financing for the 355 Central part. And so in advance of that, we wanted a deep dive that would help inform that discussion for more funding. There's a lot going on here. So I'm, again, trying to figure it out, and I'll yield to colleagues and then come back. But wanted to go to Route 29. I ask about the cost of all of this because it is undefined, undetermined how we're going to get all of that funding. I appreciate you noting that at least for Veers Mill, you said there was a 12-to-1 return on investment if we get those investments. Is that a fair way to understand it?
Right. If we don't get the
those
federal grant,
investments.
there's not a 12-to-1 return.
Correct. So we're still waiting on funding for Veers Mill. We are going to put a very big down payment on 355 Central on Wednesday, presuming the committee and council go in that direction. And then there's still funding that is needed for the other portions of 29, New Hampshire, and North Bethesda. It was also noted, trying to find my notes, that 29 was considered complete, but that was only for phase 1, not phase 2. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Phase 1's operational. It became operational fall of 2020.
And I distinctly remember it was this committee and the previous council that made the selection for Route 29 and Hastings Drive. I was walking my dogs on Hastings just this morning. I live in that area, and thankfully we got a light there a few years ago to make it safer. But the reason that the previous council moved in the direction of having the single lane was because that was the main focus. I'm not quite sure how many of these other routes were a priority at that time, and so we wanted to make sure that Route 29, the very first line, was done as well as it could be. Since then, the route map has been expanded considerably, and Route 29 is still not complete. And as noted in previous documents and has been shared with us this morning, there were other proposals that were less expensive, but are actually in the same mindset as some of these other proposals. Let me rephrase that. Amongst these other proposals, the other routes, are there any dedicated single track lines?
So on the other two planning routes, so New Hampshire Avenue, so we haven't selected an alternative yet, so it's a little bit premature to say that. When we looked at the center running elements of the alignment, those didn't perform well in the study. That's, obviously up to you all. I don't want to be presumptuous in saying that is an alternative or not, right? So we'll come back to you in presumably late winter, early spring to have that sort of conversation with you specifically. Those didn't perform very well in either New Hampshire nor North Bethesda. Okay. So what tended to perform better in those were either center running or side running lanes. So when you're repurposing lanes either in the center or in the sides and various portions of those corridors.
And for Route 29, both those alternatives were presented. And again, the previous council chose the center, not the side. But, for two reasons, I want to say that I think there is something to be said about conformity amongst the whole system, that if there are side lanes across the entire system, then that is an understood way of operation. And then secondly, it's also noted that the side lane on 29 is 1/3 the cost for that phase 2, which brings me back to my original point of asking about overall funding to begin with. We know that funding is already tight. We know this CIP is going to be extremely tight simply from the demands that our school system is placing. Very rightfully so. Understand those needs. And so all of that is a very long way of saying I'm concerned about the funding for this entire network. And if we are in the early stages of some of these routes, or if we still have the availability and the time to rethink second phases for some of them, I think it is worth a conversation, because my goal is to have an efficient system that is able to transport people throughout our county, but that ultimately requires it to be completed, and that means money. And if we don't have the money, then the best laid plans off Gangaglay. And so I don't mean to end on that note, but I want a system built. And waiting for the perfect is sometimes the enemy of the good. And as has been noted, all of these are very important. They're all good, but do we have the resources to actually make them happen? I have other thoughts. I will pause for a second. I'll yield to either of my colleagues. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Conklin. Thank you, Mr. Henson. I have just a couple questions just as clarifying for, I think, members of the public who are probably watching us today. On Veers Mill, Mr. Henson, if you could just explain, when we require property for easements, I think a few months ago when the announcement first went out, there's a lot of confusion. This is not eminent domain. You're having conversations with residents about this. If you could just go into that a little bit more, because I do believe there was a bit of confusion among the public.
So what we're doing is looking to have conversations with folks about property. We are very aware that this is a hard conversation. There are many folks who have elements on their property that are very important to them, and those sometimes overlap with the property we need for this project. We are very thoughtful about that and very mindful, and want to make our residents whole. At the end of the day, we care about our residents. This project is to serve our residents, right? And so we want to make sure that we're able to serve them well with this project. So what we're doing is having conversations with them, talking about what's on their property, what's important to them, how can we help, how can we relocate. And so we're going through a process with them. We're ultimately doing the things that we have to do mechanically to get in that position. So we're sending them letters, official letters. They're getting the property appraised. We're sending offers, all the things that we have to do. But we're trying to do that with a very warm heart, understanding that property is important to people, and these things really do matter. But we're going through that. We have an acquisition incentive program that has the potential to add, I believe, 10% to the sale price, to the closure price, if folks close within, I believe it's 30 days. So the potential to get more money for their property. But the last thing that we want to do is go through an eminent domain process. Yes, we have the ability to do that. It is not at all our approach that we would prefer. We much prefer to have conversations with our residents, see how we can make them whole in this process, and then deliver a high-quality project that functions well for a long time in the future.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. On the planning projects that we have, New Hampshire and North Bethesda, and I think particularly North Bethesda, I know you all received it as well from the Devonshire East Homeowners Association. And I think if you could you talked about this, but the process for both, I think New Hampshire and North Bethesda are kind of in the same place. One's a little later, just by a couple of months. of how that planning moves forward. Where do we have public input? Just so people understand
Sure.
where we are in that process.
Right. So we've had meetings with the public for a prolonged period on both of those projects, specifically on North Bethesda. We've had a few public meetings. We've had CAC meetings. We've gone and had conversations individually with various groups along the way. We've had individual conversations, and those are at the process now where the study is basically done. We're glad to take comments. Folks are always welcome to send comments to our website for, I believe it's North Bethesda BRT at montgomerycountymd.com or .gov, I'm sorry, where we'll take comments. But what happens next is that we then transition over to our colleagues at planning for the planning board review. They'll review it. They have their own process to take comments, to be heard, to provide testimony. They'll presumably provide a recommendation to you all, the council. There'll be another process where you all presumably will have hearings where folks can provide testimony, come to give input, and then you all at the council presumably will then make the selection on what we should or shouldn't do, and then ultimately add it to a budget or maybe not, right? I don't want to be presumptuous here, but that's big picture how the process works.
Great. So the study goes through planning and then comes to us, and there are points in time where people have opportunities to provide public input. And what you provide to planning, then planning may make changes. And we may make changes. So just as the chair said, we've been talking about BRT for a while, and just making sure people understand where they're able to plug in that process, I think, is really important in all of this. And I will say that I remember years ago writing a letter as mayor on the New Hampshire BRT project. So I'm glad to see this moving forward in the planning stages, and just wanted to clarify those couple of points for members of the public. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Balcom.
Sure, thank you. So I think we were all, prior to this job, part of that, the BRT. I remember sitting on the original BRT task force as a representative of the Quarter Cities Transitway Coalition, which was a fully dedicated lane in all directions, sadly. So I think the funding is the biggest question. I think it's great. Thank you for the update. It's great to see all of the lines in one place and where we are. So I appreciate the slides. So I think that's something that we're going to be talking about in depth on that. And then I also think that from the perspective of, I appreciate what you said about 29. You know, the delay is the highest in the most constrained areas, of course, right? I've always had that concern about 355 Central in Gaithersburg. So there is the footprint, the available footprint is very constrained. When we look at any potential property acquisition, we have commercial buildings right up against 355 on that space, and so I think that's going to be what we would call a highly constrained area when we go 355 through that area. So I appreciate you looking at that, and we'll just continue on. From the federal funds perspective, it's great that we're so high in terms of priority. So with so much uncertainty, you feel positive about that funding?
I wouldn't say positive. I mean, positive in terms of, we're positive in that we think it's likely to happen. We're not positive in that it will absolutely happen. So we have been working regularly with FTA. We meet with them every month on both 355 and Veers Mill Road. They're very positive about the project. They've told us that we are likely to be the first project to get funded under the new administration. But ultimately, nothing is for sure until you have that grant agreement. So we will continue to work. I think that we've also, our federal delegation is aware of the Veers Mill project, really both projects, and what a priority they are for the county. Of course, I think when we see the FY26 budget finally get approved at the federal level, we'll kind of see where the capital investment grant funding is landing. That'll give us a better sense going forward about, whether we really think it's realistic that we'll get large pieces of federal funding for our projects. But for now, we are remaining relatively positive, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you to my colleagues for their questions. I just want to close out this conversation by talking about a bus rapid transit route that has not been as detailed here, but is being actively discussed at the council, and that is BRT on University Boulevard. How do you see that playing in here? And at the same time, the Route 29 and the proposal, particularly through Four Corners, how do you see the interplay between what is being proposed at planning, both in terms of the BRT line, how it fits in here, and then the design as well?
So we've got the dedicated lanes on University Boulevard. So certainly if at some point we have a bus rapid transit project on that corridor, we're fortunate to already have some of the physical infrastructure, and that's great. As you all know, that project is not currently in our work program, so it is not something that we are currently advancing. The MCDOT has made comments in the master plan process that we do think that having sort of the continuous dedicated lanes on both corridors, 29 and University, would be important from a mobility perspective. But I mean, currently we're working on 29, we're not working on University, so we'll see where things land on the master plan.
Sure. Appreciate that, because again, we're dealing with a lot. And trying to make sense of what the funding order and structure and phases are is really important as we look at the whole county and as we juggle all these different priorities. And so, at some point in the near future, I know that the full council will be talking about University, but as you just shared with us, there are those dedicated bus lanes now, but that's not considered BRT by MCDOT standard?
Right, and it's sort of like, if you think about the Great Seneca Transit Network as well, we have a lot of dedicated bus lanes, and we do have frequent service, but we don't have all of the elements that we build with the BRT. The big difference is the stations. I mean, the stations on US 29 are significantly larger, more amenities, and we do have the dedicated buses as well, the Flash branded buses. And so, and typically with the Flash projects, we also, as we've mentioned, do a lot with pedestrian and bike improvements as well. So the dedicated lanes are a significant piece of a bus rapid transit line, but not the only piece. Like, you need all of those pieces together to truly make it bus rapid transit.
And so for the planning staff, planning board, let's say, to propose BRT on University as part of their corridor master plan, what then does that do or signal to MCDOT?
Well, University is already a corridor in the countywide transit corridors master plan, so it was already one of our corridors. It just wasn't one that we've been working on.
So this is the gray space I'm trying to figure out, right? Because it already has a dedicated bus lane, but it's not considered BRT, yet they want, right?
Right.
Mr. Kenny for an assist, maybe.
I can provide some background as council staff are working on that plan currently as well. In fact, we have a work session this afternoon where we're talking about these transportation recommendations. The recommendation that is different from the 2013 Functional Transit Corridors Master Plan that Ms. Conklin was referencing is the Planning Board has recommended adding bus lanes through the Four Corners couplet. The 2013 plan had dedicated bus lanes for the BRT on University Boulevard throughout the entire corridor, save for Four Corners. So that is the addition that the Planning Board has made. The plan also affirms the 2013, all the remaining recommendations within the 2013 plan, but that's what the University Boulevard corridor plan as transmitted by the Planning Board would add to that line.
So if you could just restate that again, it sounds like you said that the proposals for University to extend beyond Four Corners, beyond 29, right?
So the 2013...
Closer to Blair High School. I'm just trying to figure out, right, what the difference and distinctions are here. Ms. Peckett.
Sorry, Haley
Please.
Peckett, Deputy Director, and I've been more involved in the University Boulevard plan, working with Planning Board. So I just wanted to clarify, happy to talk more about that at the PHP session this afternoon. But just to clarify, in the Master Plan of Highways and Transitways, we talk about where our dedicated transit lanes will go. The University Boulevard was deferred. The discussion on some of those was deferred through because the University Corridor plan was already in place. So now that we're at the University Corridor plan, we have to decide, do we keep it as these however many general traffic lanes? Do we designate them as transit lanes at some point in the life of the plan? Not to say that there is any project that is not within the prerogative of the corridor plan to determine which projects will advance, but more that we're going to designate what the use and how many lanes of each type should be designated through that plan. So the debate at Planning Board was whether to keep those general purpose, whether to remove general purpose lanes and repurpose them for bicycle or pedestrian facility, or whether to keep transit lanes. MCDOT tried to advocate for keeping the transit lanes as a designation so that if we get to the point of planning for BRT within the life of the University Boulevard Corridor Plan, we would then study and do all the traffic modeling to determine if those are needed. We know it's really constrained in Four Corners, so we wouldn't put those lanes in if it weren't going to function across all the different modes.
Thank you. For anyone following, that conversation will be continued later this afternoon at PHP. But bringing it back to the proposal that we just received, did the BRT proposals along these corridors go through similar processes through master plans or sector plans, or were these basically MCDOT and SHA initiated proposals?
So it kind of depends on, they've all had kind of their own story, each corridor. Veers Mill and US 29, I believe, were initiated by the state even before we had the 2013 master plan. So those are projects that have been like on the books for a long time. So those just continued work. At some point, the county took them over, but they've been worked on for a long time. 355 has, I believe, got put on the work program just because it's such a high priority in terms of development. And it's an area of the county that, once you go north of Shady Grove, doesn't have the high capacity transit. And so that was seen to be a priority. North Bethesda Transitway is sort of an interesting one because the county executive at the time actually didn't propose that one for a planning study, but the state was doing the managed lanes study, and it was going to be managed lanes from Virginia. And so there was a thought that if those managed lanes got built and you had that transit connection from Tyson's, that you should have some dedicated lanes, going from 495 across. And so at the time, that got put in our work program specifically so that we would be prepared if those managed lanes were coming to have our own transit connection. And New Hampshire primarily got put, I think, on the work program because of White Oak and the need for additional transportation capacity. So they've all kind of had their own story in terms of why they've been prioritized. In some cases, there are corridor plans, like Veers Mill had a corridor plan that was done actually while we were already doing the transportation BRT study. Planning did a corridor study on Veers Mill. I wouldn't necessarily, they're related, but it didn't drive the decision to fund Veers Mill. That project was already moving along. So I'm not sure if that sort of answers the question in terms of the story behind each one.
Whether it clears things up
Yeah.
is, I leave
Yeah.
for individuals who are
Right.
listening. But I think all of that information is incredibly helpful
Right.
because it shows that all of these have progressed in very different fashions. And there is no one way to get any of these built. And quite frankly, none of them have been built because the designs, the plans, the proposals still need the funding at the end of the day. And so important context to be continued for sure. Not seeing any other conversation about this. Appreciate this update. We'll certainly be having more, and for people who want to follow University Boulevard Corridor, PHP at 1:30 this afternoon. Thank you both for the
Thank you.
conversation. Appreciate
Thank
it. So I don't know who's sticking around, or Ms. Conklin if you're staying, or Mr. Henson if you're staying for the next conversation as well. But we are transitioning from the BRT network to Ride On Reimagined right now. Is that okay?
Good morning, Phil McLaughlin, General Manager for Ride On in the Department of Transportation, and with me today is Deanna Archie. She's our Chief for Service Planning. So we've got a handful of slides here. I did want to give you Stephen's going to put us up.
Slides should be up in a moment. All right.
So I want to give you a quick overview of what our network looks like today, because it will change come January. So today we operate 83 fixed routes. We have 2 flex zones. These are our demand response services. And then, of course, we have the one flash line along US 29. The reason I say today is because come January, we will grow to an additional flex zone. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We are the second largest transit system in the state behind MTA. About 310 peak vehicles, almost 400 within our fleet, and we're carrying about 61,000 riders per day. And in terms of our ridership trends, so the last fiscal year, which ended June 30th, FY25, we were up about 4% compared to the previous fiscal year. But fiscal year 24 compared to 23 is where we saw the real growth post-pandemic, was about 27%. And we can, near the end of last fiscal year, March, April, May, June, we saw a little bit lower of a trend, only about a 1 to 2%, even though last year was 4% total. This year, in the first 3 months of this fiscal year, we're up 5.4%. Okay, there's a handful of factors that have gone into this. On June 29th. Basically, at the beginning of this fiscal year, we launched a zero fare program, and we also made, as part of Ride On Reimagine and the Better Bus Network, we made some significant changes with WMATA. We restructured about 4 or 5 of our fixed routes. We swapped services with WMATA to put us in a position that when we launch the BRT, we can make service adjustments along Veers Mill. That 5.4, we've been working to sort of attribute it to where the real growth is. We think about 2 to 3% of that can be tied exclusively to the swap. We took over the queues, which is now our Route 40. We swapped out our Route 10 and the L8 and T2 on the weekends. That netted us additional riders, about 2 to 3%. So that was sort of built in. As I said, near the end of last fiscal year, we were seeing a little bit of growth, 1.5%. So to answer the anticipated question of how much zero fare has helped us in ridership, we think it's in the 1 to 2% range. I do want to hedge that a little bit and wait throughout the fall, because while students had been zero fare for seven years or so, you know, as school students return to school in the fall, parents change their travel behaviors. And we only have 1 month worth of school data here. I really like to wait for the end of this quarter, and then we'll have a really, I think, a better feel of where we stand on how much zero fare has attributed to the growth in ridership. And then moving on to Ride On Reimagine. You might recall last fall we launched our Ride On Extra service, our pink and lime lines in the Shady Grove corridor. We're seeing real good numbers there. We see about 500 riders a day on each one of those routes. Offset from the fixed route is down in this corridor about 75 to 100 riders a day. So what this means is the bulk of these riders are likely new to the system. They're likely new to the system. So that's positive. We have changed some travel behavior, which is great. So this was actually the start. This was sort of our first element of Ride On Reimagine, this service. Yeah, that's there. Talking about the new Route 40, which, as I said, we began on June 29th of this year. We're carrying about 4,000 to 5,000 riders a day. You know, as you heard Joanna and Jamie mention earlier, there's about 10,000 riders in that corridor. They're not all exclusively on this Route 40. There are many other services that come on and off that corridor. Prior to launch on June 29th, we did a robust outreach effort in this corridor at Wheaton Metro, at Rockville, and at Montgomery College, just letting our customers know that, hey, the service provider is going to change here. Service levels have generally remained the same in this corridor. We continued that effort through mid-July just so that riders were comfortable, and then we kicked it back off again in September when school went back in, just to let folks know, hey, things have changed. Check out your new schedules. The services, the queue formally went from Shady Grove through Montgomery College, Rockville to Wheaton, all the way down to Silver Spring. The services along Georgia Avenue today are covered by a Metro bus service. This is the M20. So there's a lot of transfer activity that's occurring today at Wheaton Metro Station. And that transfer activity seems to be occurring fairly seamlessly, so with minimal impact. Transfers can be punitive, but it's been with minimal impact. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to be launching a third flex zone. This is in the northern New Hampshire corridor. This is, you might recall, as part of the Better Bus Network, WMATA eliminated the Z2. I think many of you received constituent emails. This will substitute and meet the demand of many of those people who've called in. So this is a sort of a hybrid flex fixed route. So the darker shaded portion up there, that'll be the demand response area. So anybody in that area will use the app just like they do in their two existing flex zones today. They will request a ride there. The single line, which is New Hampshire Avenue down to White Oak, that'll be a limited stop service. So it won't, you'll still be required to access the app to order the ride there, but we'll just make limited stops in that particular corridor from Cloverleaf down to White Oak, and everything else will be a demand response. The other two zones that we operate today, they don't have a fixed route component to it. They're simply a demand response zone. And then for other projects related to Ride On Reimagine, you know, we have just made, because of the growth that we saw in FY24 and the growth last year and even the growth earlier this year, we've had to make about 40% of our system we had to make schedule adjustments to, mostly due to the increase in ridership. And of course, the federal workers going back to work in the spring last year has changed the travel pattern. So we've had to make adjustments, which are part of the maintenance functions related to Ride On Reimagine. And then some additional growth. So in our CIP, we will have replacement buses, battery electric replacement buses for our flex fleet, and also additional buses for growth in that system as well. We do expect that the short-term growth in the next 2 to 3 years will be in the flex program, in the demand response program. We will be continuously making maintenance type adjustments to our service in response to ridership, in response to growth. And what we call for in the Ride On Reimagine plan is to increase frequency and span of service on a significant portion of our routes. That will be occurring over the next handful of years as well. And then the future growth, as the BRT, much of what we have in Ride On Reimagine is tied to the growth in the BRT system. So, you know, obviously the next line that we'll implement here will be Veers Mill. We will reduce the service on the Route 40, not eliminate it, because it'll serve all the intermittent bus stops. But what we will also do is all the routes that feed that corridor will be modified as well. That's about 5 or 6 routes as well, and the frequencies will change to support the growth of the BRT system. That's part of our Reimagine plan, and that'll happen again when we get to 355, which is, you know, 2030, 2031. And then, of course, we continue, not highlighted here, but I did want to mention our zero emission transition plan. So that is ongoing. So today we have about 50 battery electric buses in our fleet. I didn't put one in there, Stephen, sorry. We have about 50 battery electric buses in our fleet. which is about 20 to 25% of our overall fleet. Over the next year, we'll have another 60 of those buses come in, replacing all of our old diesel buses and eventually our CNG buses. So that is that's an important element that we're doing within our organization. And that concludes, and open it up for comments and questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. McLaughlin, Ms. Archie, for the presentation and the slides. I guess the headline is the 61,000 daily riders, and from, I guess, the pre-pandemic, I think we were around 70,000. Is that around right?
Probably a little bit less that last year, 68, 69-ish, yeah.
Which is understandable given lots of workplace dynamics that have changed, but clearly buses, we know, never decreased in ridership to the same degree that Metro did, right? Heavy rail people who take buses more typically have to go into work, and they don't have that flexibility to stay home and telework as well. But I want to go back to the flex zone and the new flex zone that's coming up. Very exciting stuff, clearly in an area that WMATA and their Reimagine program had decreased some service. So can you explain a little bit more within that flex zone area in the greater Sandy Spring, north of Colesville? People will use the app to call for a bus that will then take them down to White Oak. Is that like the fixed destination?
Good morning. Yes, the on-demand area will operate similar through an app. So you will request the trip where you are. It would pick up where you are and your destination point. So even though it's showing a narrow line, that's considered a whole zone between the Cloverly area to White Oak.
Got it. So that line is part of that zone as well. Right. If you're on New Hampshire Avenue, essentially, or Colesville, whichever one. I guess that's New Hampshire Avenue. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've identified 5 to 6 stops in that. It's about a 6-mile segment in that 6-mile segment right there. So it's fairly limited, but still accessible, mostly with transit connections.
And I assume that builds upon the success of the other flex zones. How are those working as well?
They've not responded as well to post-pandemic as the fixed route system has. They're a little bit slower to return. We do, in the near term, probably the next year, we do plan to modify those zones. They've probably become a little bit stale. Remember, we launched that just pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic came. They shut down. We didn't operate it for 2 years, and we did not go back and do a whole bunch of marketing. We need to freshen those up a little bit to get those back. And we maybe at the time we have one operates in the midday only, the other one operates in the peak periods only, and they were meant to be trial cases. We had never done this type of service. It is time for us to go back and freshen that up. Maybe we need to change the times in the 2 zones, or the span of service needs to change. But we definitely need to let people know that service is operating. I'm afraid as many folks don't know it's operating.
Sure. Getting a little ahead of ourselves, do you expect that to be a proposal in the budget coming forward, or another policy decision to be made outside?
I think more the latter, honestly, only because at this point, we might have the existing resources, and it's just a matter of doing something more creative with those resources.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. Councilmember Balcom.
Sure. Thanks. So yes, thank you for the flex program. I've got a flex area. If you're looking for one, just let me know. We can talk about that. But it is good. I think that is going to be an answer to a lot of the outlying areas. It's just a matter of marketing and making sure the program works for them. Also great to see the numbers for the pink and green routes. My morning commute, I often see a couple of the buses, and I'm always trying to see through the dark, the windows, how many people are on there. So that was really good news. I appreciate that. So in the prior panel, Chair Glass talked about the dedicated lanes on the BRT and the differentiation between the designated lanes and the BRT. So from the perspective of the ride-on, What is the arrangement for ride-on to use the BRT designated lanes? And how does that work? Or does it work?
So it will really depend. It really depends on each corridor and how the designated lanes have been implemented. So, for example, on Great Seneca Transit Network, which is not BRT, but let's just use that because we have the lanes, right? And also University is a good example of this as well. When you have those curbside lanes, pretty much all buses can use it. They have to use them, in fact, to be able to access the curbside stations. In corridors where we're going to construct a median, either a single lane or dual lane, we anticipate that would be really limited just to the bus rapid transit buses, because the stations will also be in the middle of the roadway, and the local buses stop more frequently and need to be able to access the stops on the side. The exception could be on 29, for example, if there are express buses, like Maryland Transit Administration buses that are operating closed door, that don't need to stop on the side of the road, they may be able to use the center running lane as well. But any bus that needs to stop more frequently and at different stops would not be able to use those center lanes.
So logistically, it just might not make sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, University Boulevard's a good example, right? So we have that curbside lane today. We access that. We have 4 or 5 routes between Dennis and Wheaton that access that lane. So it does provide some benefit. But as Joanna said, I do think that it would have to be very corridor specific. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. And then just while I have you, we have had some concerns about the Route 100, some delays. We can take that offline unless you have any information on.
I do not have it today. I am very, very aware of this comment that came in, and our team was researching that. I think it was a weekend thing, and we had some operational issues that particular day, and I think that's what it's tied to, but I'll get back to Craig.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Stewart.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I had a question specifically about Route 16, and this would go for other routes as we're talking about the Purple Line coming to completion. It's at 82% now. I'm just going to keep repeating that over and over again. And so like Route 16 connects Silver Spring and Tacoma Park through Long Branch and the Crossroads area. But even as we're bringing more BRT online, like what is the thinking of, as we're doing these other things, some of these ride-on routes and things?
Yeah, so the Route 15, right, which is the one that runs between Silver Spring and Tacoma Line, almost mirrors the Purple Line corridor over there. That will have significant adjustments. There will be adjustments to other fixed routes, but not significant, more so to accommodate the turning movements that have been changed or modified. They'll generally cover the same local stops that they're covering today. Route 16 is a high-performing service. It carries nearly 3,000 riders a day. And so it'll have a couple of tweaks, specifically in that University of New Hampshire area where it's going to be really challenging navigating that intersection. It'll have some turning movement changes, but generally those routes will stay the same. Quebec Terrace, that route also serves Quebec Terrace. May have some modifications there as well, but generally still link those 2 endpoints, Tacoma and Silver Spring.
Great. Yeah, they're used a great deal.
Yeah.
Now going to the other part of my district, the North Bethesda and Grosvenor areas on, I think it's Route 26 and 46. Is there any chance we can change the materials to say White Flint to North Bethesda?
Wow, we went hard to make it say North Bethesda.
Yeah, I know. I think we still have some things that say White Flint on those routes. So yeah.
Oh, it still says it?
Yeah, there are some materials that still say. I'm not saying go back. I'm saying we've.
Oh, I
gotten,
thought you said.
No, we've gotten some questions, and we can take this offline. That there's still some things that say White Flint. So
then we need to get those corrected.
Okay,
we
awesome.
worked really hard to make them say North Bethesda.
Yeah. No, that's That would be great. I think there's some we get sent things, different materials, but we'll take that offline and let you know, since you all have that obviously on your radar.
Yes.
And then the last question I had was the packet. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. In the last pages of the packet have showing the different routes and ridership over the last year. But given some of the changes and everything, it was really interesting to see where some lines have increased, 20, some of them 30%, some have decreased. And I'm just curious, anything jumping out at you all in particular in terms of looking at the different ridership numbers and the percent change, or given some of the shifts between WMATA and Ride-On, is this like a year of transition for us?
It's interesting. That was a concern that WMATA had raised to us when we proposed the zero fare, when we were considering the zero fare, is that riders in Montgomery County are going to change how they travel throughout the county. They're going to want to get the zero fare as opposed to paying. What we've done for a long, long time as a planning policy in Montgomery, service planning policy, was to design complementary services and not competitive services. So, for riders to totally switch service providers to access a particular location would take them so much longer because we've designed it. The one route that jumps out at me is our Route 55. This is the service. This is 355 Central, where the BRT will eventually go. That route operates between Rockville Station, serves Montgomery College, Shady Grove Station, Lake Forest, and then on up to Germantown. It's almost... the more service we put out there, the more people ride it. It's if you build it, they will come type of service. It's just amazing how many riders are on that route. And we just added back in the spring, we added additional service to that route, and ridership grew again. It's the more you put out there, the more they ride. That one really jumps out at me. I don't know if you have any.
Just wanted to quickly note, there's a lot of price sensitivity between rail and bus, and so that's not something that Phil mentioned. But anecdotally, we've talked to riders. It's been really hard to prove this with data, but it'd be interesting to do that. There's a lot of people who will take multiple inefficient bus routes and transfers rather than pay the fare, especially Ride-On. They may have been treating it as free for a long time. It's only been officially zero fare for a few months. But I do think that when you see some of these high ridership on buses that are redundant with rail networks, I think the same will go for Purple Line. You'll see a lot of the people that are our highest ridership that will just sit on those buses and transfer to get to where they need to go for free.
Great. Well, that's really helpful. Thank you, Ms. Peckett. And that's all I have. Thank you.
No, really important conversation. Appreciate the points raised by my colleagues, and the point that we end on, that we want a system that serves everybody, and we know that it needs to be reliable. And that is of utmost importance to folks, that if they have to get to work, have to get to school, have to run an errand, they need and want a bus that's going to be there to take them where they have to go. And then also noting the percentage in ridership changes that Councilmember Balcom noted, Councilmember Stewart noted. The reason I said Balcom is because the largest increases and the largest ridership are mid and up county.
Yeah.
And so remember who we're serving, who's transit dependent, and that's why we ultimately do this work. So thank you for the briefings. More conversations clearly to be had in the months and in the budget to come, because ultimately we need to fund these services and find the money for these services. But appreciate this briefing, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.